What if toys were alive? What if dinosaurs existed today? Or what if I gave this entire talk in Klingon? A great what if can evoke an entire story in your imagination. And for a storyteller, this question is essentially our Big Bang. It's when worlds are created, characters are born, and ideas are formed. But once we've started to create this world, we build our journey through it, our narrative, by asking more questions. Questions like, what problem starts our story, and what's our goal? Does our character have a flaw, and if so, a deeper need? What steps do we take? What conflict do we face? And how do we overcome it? And in the end, what happens? And hopefully when we string these answers together, we create the heartbeat of a great story, that emotional roller coaster with the ups and the downs, the twists and the turns and the butterflies, all for an audience to be entertained, escape, and to connect. But is that actually why we tell stories? To entertain, provide an escape, and create this connection through a shared experience? What if it isn't? What if sometimes we tell stories for the wrong reasons? So I came across this question in my journey infusing story into the culture of businesses, where on one hand, we'd help businesses by telling their story through film, design, and experiences, and on the other, we would help them tell their own through a series of story workshops. And the first thing we did in these workshops was ask attendees to be a little bit vulnerable and share a failure with us, to help them discover the start of their own personal stories. And so I'd like to share some of those failures with you. Because some of them, we felt the pain. Like climbing the rope in the Spartan race, I was 2 knots away from reaching the bell. And some broke our hearts. I wrote prom ? On a t-shirt. I walked up to my crush during lunch, and the answer was no. And then some left us with a few extra questions. I didn't check my oil in my VW bus before driving to California. Oh, I blew my engine. I had to hitchhike to a phone and got a ride from a Mexican pirate. But it was all good, LOL. But then we started to see a theme. I failed to convince my boss to promote me. And I failed to convince my boss, well, because he wasn't a good listener. And I failed to convince the UK market to ramp up product on the new platform. See, the word convince popped up over and over again, and we started to see this unfortunate truth that story is becoming a bit of a buzzword, our tool of choice to help us persuade and not connect. And if you turn to Google for storytelling, you'll start to see the same thing. The art of persuasive storytelling, using stories to persuade, how to tell a persuasive story. We're putting this pressure on stories to influence an audience, and the problem with that is, one, we tell stories for an audience, and we just want to be entertained. But then, on a personal note, when we try to persuade or convince with a story, sometimes we can get so ingrained in our own opinions, ideas, and beliefs, while also trying to mitigate all the things that might make us seem less credible or less perfect. And so our tendency is to leave out our failures, our flaws, our imperfections, our vulnerabilities, all these things that make us human, that make us relatable. And so that heartbeat that we've been trying to build, we lose the bottom half, our story flatlines, and as an audience, we emotionally disengage. You see, for a story to work, it requires both. The highs and lows, the problems and goals, the flaws and needs, all of these elements, they work together to work against each other through conflict. We take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And my favorite example of this is, what if you lost your son and you were a fish? In Finding Nemo, Marlin is this tiny fish in this massive ocean. He's a clownfish and he's not funny. His problem, he's lost his son and his goal is to find Nemo, but he also has a flaw. He's already lost his wife and all of his other kids, and he can't bear to lose Nemo too. So he becomes overprotective in the way that I think we all would. Like, I would not let my son touch the butt either. And so while his goal is to find Nemo, he has this deeper need to let him go. So I want to share one more failure with you. Trying to communicate my perspective, I failed to listen and damaged a relationship. So thinking about opposites and contradictions, this push and this pull that is a story, maybe our goal is to be the authors, the storytellers, to get up on stage or present in a meeting or give a toast around a table and to tell our own stories. Maybe that's our goal. But what if our deeper need was to connect by discovering the stories of others? Can we take that step back, take the pressure off of stories to influence behaviors, and instead use that magic and that curiosity of discovering a story to help us connect with the worlds and ideas of others? For example, in your next conversation or your next disagreement even, start with your own what if. This big, wild, almost impossible question that's designed to open your mind. What if I'm wrong? What if we're both right? What if it doesn't matter? It can be anything as long as it makes you wonder. And then encourage them to share a personal story that may have formed their opinion with you. And most importantly, if they don't think that they have one, discover it together by asking them the same questions a storyteller would ask. Can you tell me about a problem you faced and what was your goal? Maybe you had a flaw or a deeper need that you were hoping to fulfill. What steps did you take and what conflict did you face? Like, did you make any mistakes or were you scared? And how did you overcome that? What happened in the end? Did you succeed, fail, learn something new? Or maybe your story is still to be continued, and hopefully by this point, if that's the case, I'm down to keep listening. Discover the heartbeat of their story in a way that you can emotionally connect to. When I was a kid, my grandmother, her name is Carolyn, during the summer, she would send my cousins and I to science camp. And on the weekends, she would trek us through mountains, and every once in a while she would stop, kneel down, just to point out what made certain plants unique. And at night, we would stare up at the sky, and she would outline the various planets, the stars, and the constellations they formed. She introduced me to so many strange and wonderful mysteries of the world and sparked my curiosity and encouraged all of my questions. And sometimes she had the answers, sometimes she didn't. But through this, she taught us it's okay if you don't. Just keep searching, keep asking those questions. And now for me, as an adult, when I feel like I need to have the answers and strong opinions and make my opinions known, discovering stories has kept me curious and connected to new people and new ideas, and I believe that it's good to have a story and to share it. That's important. But it's also important, if not even more necessary, to keep searching for them. Because you need both. And there's an entire world out there and people with the depth of space inside them and all of the endless possibilities that exist just behind that blank page that is a story in waiting to be heard and connected to, if we could just overcome whatever conflict might be between us to discover them. By being curious and asking the right questions, not to tell our stories, but to discover the stories of others. And by doing this, you won't convert anybody to your ideas or opinions, and you don't have to be converted to theirs. And what if that doesn't matter? What if all that matters is this deeper, more authentic connection to another human being? Now, this might not change the world, but what if?